Turkish Airlines presents Business Africa.
Hello and a warm welcome to this edition of Business Africa. I'm your host, Afolake Oyinloye. The top stories this week. Nigeria is Africa's biggest remittances receiver, while South Africa sends out the most remittances. We have interesting insight from a new index by Western Union on remittance trends across the continent. Sudanese are worried about a looming food shortage that can be traced to poor uptake of wheat harvest in previous seasons, high input prices and high global food prices. And in Senegal, a massive gold rush attracted dreamers from all over West Africa and compelled the government to regulate artisanal gold mining. We bring you stories of the hits, misses and challenges of miner in the Kedugu region. With the mushrooming diaspora community, remittances have become the largest source of external financing in many African countries. Research has found that these inflows are critical for households in the face of disaster and crises like the ongoing financial crunch. Have a look at these trends in the following report.
The African continent alone already accounts for 70% of the world's $1 trillion value in mobile money services. Money transfers are critical in sustaining families and communities. An index by Western Union surveyed 5 key markets in Africa: South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal and Morocco. The research found that 62% of Africa's consumers receive money transfers at least once a month, and that 59% send funds across borders at the same rate. Despite an already strong uptake of digital remittances, not every consumer is convinced. This mostly comes down to trust. Senders also stay abreast of exchange rates. In Kenya, almost 1 in 5 senders say strength of currency is a key influence on the value and frequency of transfers. In 2022, Nigeria's inbound remittance flows were estimated to be $21 billion. South Africa is the largest remittance send market in Africa. Meanwhile, the cost of living squeeze means consumers are relying more on money transfers. Already, 81% of receivers across the continent are asking senders for bigger sums.
Almaz Nagesh, the founder and executive director of African Diaspora Network, joins us to share more insights on the impact of remittances across the continent. Welcome to the show. Now, last year, your company and the U.S. Department of State hosted discussions on the contribution of the diaspora towards Africa's growth beyond remittances. Now, share a bit about that experience with us.
When you talk about remittances and the continent of Africa, you're talking about 54 countries to 55 countries. And as a whole, remittances in 2019 dwarfed the imagination that people were not going to send back to their community. It just didn't happen. In fact, the diaspora gave back. So you've got data between 81 billion and $95 billion that has come to the continent in the form of remittances. So the largest recipient of remittances in Africa is Nigeria. And then, of course, it makes sense because Nigeria is also the largest country in the continent. What this tells you is also that remittances in Africa is 3 times more than what Africa gets from aid and foreign direct investments. And so that is actually the crux of the economy of the continent. The question that we are at right now is, what can the diaspora do to go beyond remittances? So that means investing in the continent in areas that will make more sustainable development for the continent.
Almaz, what can be done to ensure or deliver a future-ready Africa?
The future of Africa is its people, and especially the youth, young women and men must be looked at differently if Africa is going to hold on the future, which I believe it will. We just have to figure out ways to work together to make that happen. But then I am sitting here in Silicon Valley saying this can only happen if policies change and the governments create an ecosystem where all of us, the private sector, the diaspora, the government, the NGOs, all together working for one goal, and that is to create the sustainable economy by investing in youth. I think the future of Africa is youth.
Now, are there proofs that remittances have direct impact on the GDPs of African economies?
Well, they would indirectly, maybe not directly, but they do, because if you because money in remittances, the problem with remittances, it's not scalable, because it's transactional. It's between family to family, friend to friend, and so it's not very easy to do. But on the other hand, there's a lot of taxation on remittances. That is part of the GDP, and there might be other ways that the countries are also counting their GDP. But it is really, in fact, at one point I remember in many parts of the country, in many parts of African countries, remittances was the only income that they had. The majority of their income was really remittances. When diaspora stops sending remittances, you can see the ripple effect in the community. So it really is part of the GDP in however way that they count it. But I really believe that remittances play a big role if they are more than the foreign direct investment and more than what Africa gets from aid. I think then remittances plays a huge role.
Thank you so much for those insights.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Sudan consumes about 1 million tons of wheat annually, and yet local production only meets up to 17% of the market needs. With local production expected to go down by 25% and escalating global food prices, the situation looks dire for a country that is one of the most vulnerable to hunger crisis on the continent. Let's find out more.
Agriculture is the backbone of the Sudanese economy, accounting for 60% of total national exports and generating a third of its gross domestic product. It employs more than half of the country's workforce. Poor maintenance of irrigation systems is adding to the problem, as the region is hit by the impact of climate change. It's creating conditions where many are struggling to keep their businesses afloat.
We're expecting productivity this year to be lower than before. Besides the high cost of production materials and operations, the price of fertilizers was up and cultivated areas are smaller. Many farmers will quit this job as it becomes unprofitable.
The situation has been exacerbated by the persistent microeconomic crisis, resulting in rampant inflation, the escalation of conflict, and the current global food and energy price hikes that have hit the country severely.
The government should lower the volume of imported wheat amid the globally rising food prices and start to localize the wheat production by putting forward encouraging policies and prices and facilitating production materials that will help lower the food insecurity the country's facing and also boost the domestic production and the economy.
Sudan consumes about 1 million tons of wheat annually, most of which comes from the Black Sea countries, while the local production covers only about 12 to 17% of the local market needs, according to official UN reports. However, the government says it's planning to plant 1 million acres of wheat during the current winter season.
Over the last 20 years, Kédougou region in eastern Senegal has witnessed a massive gold rush, which has attracted people from neighboring countries like Guinea and Mali. What were once sparsely inhabited villages are now beehives of activities with more people, more businesses, and more urban-related vices like human trafficking and prostitution. We have a detailed report.
For the past 20 years, eastern Senegal has been experiencing a veritable gold rush. This gigantic site in the village of Bantakukuta has been legally hosting gold miners since 2014, an attempt by the Senegalese state to control the activity. But there are still illegal practices on the ground, like the use of mercury. It's a polluting but effective method for capturing gold in rock debris. Thanks to its catch of the day, Mamadou will earn about 20 euros. It's mercury and gold that come out together, and then you can take a handkerchief, remove gold with that, remove gold with the handkerchief, so the mercury will go down, the gold will stay in your hand, like that. In the early 2000s, the small village had only about 30 houses. Today, a whole economy has developed around gold mining, but with it came the arrival of drugs and prostitution. Now that there is gold, there are many people who have come for gold panning. So right now, people have come to do the gold panning, and a lot of drugs have gone into that gold panning. In this makeshift shed, this Malian buys gold from gold diggers. For the gram of gold, it pays about 40 euros, still a little more than the official Senegalese counters. Most of the gold will end up eventually in Mali for resale. Well, I'm going to sell in Mali, in Bamako. If we buy this, we'll send it to Bamako to sell in the big office there. The situation worries some observers. This is the case of the Timbuktu Institute, which points out in a report the vulnerabilities in the region: unemployment, migratory flows generated by gold, proximity to Mali in crisis. These are all factors that makes us fear the export of jihadism to eastern Senegal.
And that's all we had for you this week on Business Africa. Thanks for joining us. For more business stories and news, stay tuned to African News and Africanews.com.
Business Africa was presented by Turkish Airlines.